Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar this afternoon or morning if you are in a different time zone than the East Coast. We are very excited to talk with everybody about how principals can invite policymakers to their buildings and conduct shadowing visits with them. This has been something that has been an increasing priority for the National Association of Secondary School Principals in recent years. We believe that principals and school leaders can make a big impact by inviting members of Congress, state legislators, and other policymakers to their building to show them what's really going on inside of a school and to advocate for some of our policy priorities. So we are so thrilled that everyone was able to join us and have this discussion with us. So let's go ahead and jump into the webinar here. So first, I would like to introduce our presenters on the webinar today. So I am Greg Waples. I am the Senior Manager of State Engagement and Outreach for NASSP, and I'm joined by my colleague, Zach Scott, who is our Federal Engagement and Outreach Manager. And we are on NASSP's policy and advocacy team, so working on our federal policy and advocating to members of Congress for the priorities of principals, school leaders, and public education in general is our role with the association. And we're also joined by Aaron Huff, who is the committee chair on NASSP's Board of Directors for the Advocacy Committee. And he is also the principal of Benjamin Bosse High School in Evansville, Indiana. And then we are also joined by Vicki Puckett, who is an NASSP state coordinator from the state of Washington. And she is the principal of Mercer Island High School in Mercer Island, Washington. And thank all of you very much for joining us. We are really happy that you were able to make the time, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to run through is just a quick agenda for today's call. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what the purpose and benefit of conducting a shadowing visit is. So why take your time as a school leader and somebody who's very busy with a lot of other priorities to invite a lawmaker into your school for a visit? We'll answer why the visits make a difference to policymakers and also to your school, your students, and to the priorities of school leaders. Next, we'll run through some of the best practices for how to actually invite those lawmakers to your school and get them to commit to actually paying that visit. And then we'll run through how to conduct a shadowing visit once you have them in the building and some best practices for things to do while you have them there. Last, we'll hear from our two principals on the call, Aaron and Vicki, who will tell us firsthand about their experiences conducting shadowing visits last year with some of their members of Congress who came to their schools to visit them, and they'll talk about what they got out of those visits. If you have any questions throughout the webinar today, there is a chat feature in Zoom meetings. So if you look under the More tab in the navigation bar, you'll see a chat there. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, just type them into that chat, and then when we get to the end, we'll try and answer any written questions that we have. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Zach Scott, to get us started.
Great, thanks so much, Greg. So some of you, Greg just kind of prefaced there, some of you may be wondering why shadowing visits are so important or what you can really get out of them. And it's actually, the good way to think about it is what can policymakers get out of them really? So there are a variety of reasons that we've listed here on this slide that we think that are really important for these reasons, but we really want to highlight a couple. Really the main reason though I'm going to highlight is that shadowing visits are the absolute best way to show legislators how the principalship operates. Many members of Congress are typically older individuals from a certain more affluent background quite often who have not attended a school in quite some time. Some of them maybe have never even attended public school, and they're unaware of the changes to your role in the schools that you all lead. As I'm sure many of you know who have been in the principalship for a long time, they really have changed, cycled over the years. I'm hoping that some of you at least find my inclusion of Principal Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off on the slide is somewhat comical, but this is really the lens that many legislators are seeing principals through. They see principals as disciplinarians whose purpose is to remain in the office, deal with the problem children, and not get directly involved in the school throughout the day. These shadowing visits are a great way for you to debunk these myths and show them exactly what you do. I typically may always make the joke, you know, I'm sure as a principal you're sitting in your office all day and every principal immediately responds with uproarious laughter at that because they're often on their feet all day. But a lot of, like I said, a lot of lawmakers and policymakers don't understand that. So while this will allow you to debunk a lot of these myths. It'll also allow lawmakers the opportunity to see exactly how the legislation and policies that they are enacting directly impact your school, the educators in your school, and the students that you are leading. So near the bottom of here, you can actually see some examples of the policies that directly impact a principal's profession that you could discuss. NASSP has been focusing on these for a long time. Title II Part A, funding that can be used for principal professional development, educator professional development, funding for improving school infrastructure. Those are always things that are really good to highlight in a school for a lawmaker. Even last year, I shadowed a principal in a school. He had 2 windows in his entire school, and I guarantee you his lawmaker had no idea about that. His school was made in the 70s. He had 2 windows and 2 classrooms in his school, and so those are pretty prime real estate, to say the least. But I guarantee you a lot of policymakers aren't aware of those things, so bringing them into school can really show them that. One last point I want to make on this slide here is that these visits are also a great way to get students more civically engaged with policymakers. A lot of recent data has shown that students are more often to vote when they have directly gotten involved in civics and had a chance to speak with lawmakers. And this is a really great way to do that. If you look on the screen here, we have a lawmaker speaking with plenty of students in a school there. So having them come into your school and actually meet with your students is also not just a way to show them what your job is like, but to get them more in tune with what your students need, and then to get your students more involved with the legislative process overall. And if we go on to the next slide, we're actually going to look at some data that also shows just how impactful these site visits can be. So if we look here, like I said, these next couple slides will show some statistics here. All this data comes from a recent survey of congressional offices conducted by the Congressional Management Foundation, or CMF for short. CMF advances the goal by working broadly with offices to get them to understand, better what they need, what offices need, and what they can learn from their constituents. So the first question they asked, one of the first questions they asked on this survey is, when a representative is trying to be visible in their district, how important would they rate the following activities? So we can see speeches to large groups was 98, but if you look at the third coming in, site visits, 95% of offices that responded to the survey said that site visits are a great way to be more visible, like these shadowing visits. Site visits are just another name for shadowing visits. If you look a couple more down, scheduled meetings with VIPs and community leaders. Principals are definitely community leaders. We cannot stress that enough. You are important in your community. I'm sure many of you are already aware of this, but we want to stress that. So 86% of offices came in with that, and even a little more general following that, 70% of offices said scheduled meetings with constituents. So as you can see, if a representative does have time off, for example, right now, August, recess, even though many schools are also in recess, but they'll have recess again sometime in October and things like that to go visit schools. It's a great way, they think, to be noticed and to be seen as active in the community, and a school is a great place to go do that. Going to the next statistic here, we look at the question was, when your representative is trying to understand constituents' views on pending issues and legislation, how important are the following activities? As you can see, once again, now we see scheduled meetings with VIPs and community leaders shoot to the top. So you do actually impact that legislation when they're trying to understand constituents' views. And like I said, once again, you are a community leader. You do know more about education than many Congress people on the Hill. So that's 97% of offices finding that important. Scheduled meetings with constituents, which was at 70% in our private statistic, shoots up to 95% now. So now it's second, and then site visits, once again, still in the top 3 with 88%. So once again, just showing that even just understanding views and the impact of legislation, this can be really important. If we go to the next slide here as well, the next question on it was, when your representative is trying to develop new ideas for issues in legislation, how important are the following activities? So the great example of this right now is we keep seeing discussions around school safety. If they are thinking of new legislation, getting them in a school and having them see firsthand some of the things you are doing may either A, show that their ideas may not be effective, they may be wrong, or B, may actually reinforce some ideas that they're having. So when we look at this one as what's somewhat or very important, 100% of the offices surveyed said meetings with VIPs or community leaders, they think that this is very important when coming up with new legislation. Once again, you know more about what you're talking about education than many of the Congress people on Capitol Hill. They will trust you. They will believe in you when you tell them things. Meetings with constituents comes in right under that at 95, so that's your more general constituents once again. And then right there, right in the mid-80 range, once again, there is site visits. So those shadowing visits really do have a great impact. And just meeting with you in general is so impactful for your members of Congress. Going on to the next slide here, we do want to highlight National Principals Month. And the reason we're kind of holding this webinar right now, there is a reason for that. Every October, NASSP partners with the National Association of Elementary School Principals and the American Federation of School Administrators to host National Principals Month. National Principals Month is a great opportunity for students, teachers, community leaders, and just our nation's schools to recognize, and policymakers to recognize the important role that principals are playing to kind of highlight the outstanding work they're doing in our schools. So each year we actually have a National Principal Shadowing Week. This is actually going to be just the third year we've had this. We just started making it. And the reason we created it was to try to get policymakers into schools. Whenever you put a national name on something, it gets them interested. They get their interest peaks a little bit. They want to do it if they have a week back home. It's a great way for them to spend a day back home visiting a principal, or even just a couple hours during a day. This week is actually falling during October 7th through 11th this year. Each congressional office is actually going to receive outreach from myself actually before the end of the week this week, meaning that they will know that this is coming. And it's a great opportunity for you to follow up with them and say, hey, I hear that you recently got contacted about National Principals Month. I would love to follow up with you and try to shadow you in my school and try to get you to shadow me in the school at some point. Now, I will point out, even though we do kind of have a specific week pointed out, that October 7th through 11 range, I highly, highly, highly suggest you try to be flexible when you're trying to schedule a shadowing visit with an office. And Greg will go into this more in just a little bit. But hosting a shadowing visit at any time is going to be super impactful and super helpful. National Principals Month and National Principal Shadowing Week is just an excellent opportunity for you to get your foot in the door to talk with them about this. So you can actually find more information on this now at principalsmonth.org/shadowing visits. We kind of have a screenshot of the page up there right now. It has recently been updated with some new statistics, some new talking points, and really it's a great resource for you to use if this is something you've never done before, to go out there and contact your members. Really easy and really simple to use. So with that, we're going to kind of wrap up my piece here, and I will kick it back to Greg so he can kind of talk about extending the invitation, conducting the visit, and some of the more finer points of those visits.
Great, thanks, Zach. So let's jump into how to actually schedule a shadowing visit and how to conduct one. So the first thing you're going to want to consider is which lawmaker, elected official, or community leader you want to invite. We always encourage our advocates to invite your federal representatives and senators, but you can also invite state lawmakers and local officials like mayors or council members. It's really up to you to decide who would most benefit from learning about the role of the principal, your school, or public education in general. So to identify your federal and state officials, you can use NASSP's legislator lookup tool, and you can see the link for that on screen here if you want to copy that down. All you have to do here is enter your information, and you'll find lots of helpful contact information for their offices. But the point I really want to emphasize is that Zach and I, as NASSP staff members, would love to help strategize with you one-on-one to get this visit scheduled. We have access to a database of congressional staff, and we can identify the specific individuals who handle scheduling for each representative and senator. So if you're interested in doing a visit, just reach out to us, shoot us an email, and we'll work with you to make it happen. We can help identify that staff. We can help you get in touch with that staff directly and help you strategize around scheduling the visit and also conducting the visit as well. And we definitely want to do that. So just shoot us an email and we'll be happy to help you set that up. So once you've identified the best person to contact about scheduling a request for the official, just send them a message explaining who you are and what you're looking to do. So if you go onto the Shadowing Visits page on the National Principals Month website that Zach had just showed us a moment ago, there is a sample email message that you can use for your convenience. If you fill out all the boxes on this form, it automatically fills in an email for you, and you can see what that form looks like on screen here and what the sample message will look like. So we've done a lot of the work here to draft a good email that will be an appropriate scheduling request to send to a congressional office. And of course, you can customize it from there and enter it in personal information and make it more personal to the request that you're sending. But this is just one tool that we have to help you in the process. After you've sent that initial request, the key is to really be persistent and to follow up, follow up, follow up. You may have to contact the scheduler several times to actually lock something down. Congressional offices are very busy, and members of Congress schedules are also very packed. So in order to lock that down, you're going to want to keep contacting them, following up, and finding a time that's going to work. And continuing with that point, the other advice I would give is don't take no for an answer. The scheduler may say that the official is busy during National Principals Shadowing Week or maybe even during the whole month of October, and there's just no time that they can come in for a visit during October. But keep following up. Ask them when would be a good time for a visit. If October doesn't work, when can they come in? Can they come in later in the year? When should you get back in touch to try and schedule a meeting? But really what we've seen is that the folks who are the most persistent about this and keep following up, they will get a meeting scheduled. Eventually that member of Congress will come to visit your school because they want to be seen in the community and they want to represent their constituents. Alternatively, if the official is unable to do a visit themselves, the scheduler may suggest having a member of the congressional staff join you for a shadowing visit instead. That is also a great option. It may not have the same gravitas as actually having the elected member of Congress there in the school themselves, but it's just as impactful for advancing our policy priorities to show the staff member that handles education issues or the legislative director or the chief of staff what's going on in the school. They're the ones who influence the member of Congress on policy, so getting them there is just as important as well. So if the member can't do it, definitely consider taking that shadowing visit with a member of their staff. Okay, so now you've got a meeting scheduled. What do we actually do to plan this? First, draft a list of potential guests you might want to invite. This is somewhat optional, but a lot of times our principals will invite some outside members. So you may have community leaders, parents, other elected officials, PTA members. You know your school and community, so think about if there are other people that would benefit from being present for part of a shadowing visit and extend invitations if so. Next, provide the congressional staff with detailed logistical information. So coordinate with them on the time that the official can be there, let them know the entrance procedure for your school, and be sure to greet them at the door when the member of Congress shows up for a visit. Third, give your staff a heads up. This may seem like a no-brainer, but it's a good idea to check in just in case. Make sure everybody knows that they are coming. And if you're bringing them to specific classes or activities to see those, consider letting teachers and other school staff know in advance. Next, plan what you will show the lawmakers. So which classes do you want them to visit? What's going to be most impactful for them to see? Plan that out and think about where you want to take them while you're there and have that kind of schedule in place so you can follow along with that. Prepare some policy talking points. So you should definitely plan on working in some asks for policy priorities for principals, schools, and students. And again, this is another point where I'd love to emphasize that NASSP is here to help with this. We can provide some policy documents and talking points on things like public education funding, school infrastructure improvements, school safety policy, and much more. So if you need suggestions for policies to talk about that are relevant to the particular congressperson that's coming in, we're here to help with that. Next, share your story and explain the issues your school is facing. I would love to emphasize that the personal story is really important. Lawmakers need to see for their own eyes what schools are like today and the challenges that they're facing. So don't just share successes. Share some of the challenges you're facing. If you have a lack of funding or a lack of staff or a lack of professional development for your staff, or you're all facing these challenges in public education every single day. But just showing what it looks like on the ground to the official is so impactful. So share your story and don't shy away from sharing some of the challenges. Also, allow the official to interact with students, teachers, and staff. As we all know, these members of Congress love to shake hands and meet people, and they're going to want to do that in your school. So give them the opportunity to meet some other people, to talk with them, to have open and natural conversations with folks. And also consider giving them the opportunity to speak to a class. Many members that we've seen in these shadowing visits that folks have done in recent years, they love to talk about civic education and civic engagement and just getting young people involved in the voting process and involved in our government and our society. So giving them that opportunity is something that they'll certainly appreciate. All right, so you've wrapped up your visit now. What are some things you can do afterwards to make sure that you're successful and maximize our impact here? So first, consider sending a press release to some of your local media outlets, informing them about the visit. NASSP has template releases that you can use, and again, this is another thing we can strategize with you on and get you that resource so you can fill it out and send to your local media. Second, share pictures from the visit and details on social media. It's really important for the community to see the great work you're doing to advocate for your school, and it will make the official happy to get these shout outs on social media as well. And be sure to use that Thank a Principal hashtag. That's hashtag Thank a Principal. That's the one we're using all October long. So any shadowing visits you're doing, definitely use that. And you can see some of these posts on screen here are shadowing visits that were done last year. So former Representative Elizabeth Esty visited one of our Connecticut Principal of the Year, Diane Bumbach. Senator Whitehouse visited a school in Rhode Island. And then we have the State Secretary of Education visiting one of our principals in Oklahoma. Next, you're going to want to follow up with congressional staff. So if you're taking the time to do this, why not make it the start of an ongoing relationship with the lawmaker's office? We know that elected officials are looking for trusted experts that they can turn to on the issues, and you can be that person for their office when it comes to education issues and issues that affect principals. So set up follow-up meetings, invite them back again, and become an ongoing advocate and a trusted resource for their office. And this is another area that we'd love to work with you on and continue that advocacy. All right, so that's the basics of how to actually conduct a shadowing visit. So now let me kick it over to Aaron Huff, who will tell us a little bit more about his visit with Congressman Larry Bucshon last year.
All right, thanks, Greg. I just wanted to introduce myself again. As he said earlier, I am the Aaron Huff. I'm the chair of the Advocacy Committee with NASSP and also the principal of Boise High School here in Evansville, Indiana. I just want to really quickly review just kind of why my personal belief as to why it's important for us to engage with lawmakers. And I had a great visit with Representative Bucshon on multiple occasions, but this is just the one he visited my school. I've been with him several times. But really, they're making decisions that impact us often without our voice. Or often without the collective voice of principals. So it's critically important for us to engage in conversations with them to provide context and background information so that they are adequately prepared to make the right decisions that ultimately affect us. So that's my personal belief in why we should be engaging with lawmakers. So got a chance through working with Zach to connect with Representative Bucshon. And once Zach made the initial connection, it took multiple correspondences back and forth before we settled on a date and time that fit within his schedule to come and visit during that time. And it really was a great visit for us. Sat down and created a schedule. As we talked about engaging students in civic conversations, I actually had him visit two of our senior courses, government and econ, which those students are oftentimes approaching the voting age. And some of them are already there to be able to vote. So we were pretty particular about what classes he visited and who he had a chance to engage with, and maybe some classes where that might offer some real important questions to him. And so they were able to do that. We had a really good time with them. The kids engaged in conversation in both of those classes. And then what we did, I actually ended up taking him to what I would consider one of our special education moderate classrooms, and they were actually in PE. And there was some real purpose behind that one, is to get him to engage with those particular students. And what I talked to him about is that we are, based on some of the accountability measures, we are required to make sure that those students also obtain a diploma. And when those students don't obtain a diploma, it is has a negative impact on our accountability measures. And when we walked into the PE gym and Representative Bouchon had a chance to engage, and I offered that information up to him, you could see him kind of draw back and be a little bit struck by our requirement in order to get those students diplomas. So really good opportunity for him to see very face-to-face and interact with a problem that we were dealing with, and something that is near and dear to our hearts, that is making sure that those kids are successful, but also making sure that the school is recognized as successful, even though we're taking additional avenues to get those kids through and making sure that they're successful beyond high school. Just talking through, we've continued to have conversations with Bouchon's office over and over through our visits for the advocacy time, and then also just in correspondence via email. I've also leveraged the call to action or text to talks, those opportunities that we have provided by NASSP, leveraging those, often get a response from their offices, and so you can get some correspondence going back and forth there. So that's just kind of a little, in a nutshell, a few minutes on my visit. I do believe it had a significant impact on him. During that time, he sat down with myself and my assistants as we planned some professional development. And in that conversation, we talked about resources to adequately provide professional development that's job embedded, or providing opportunities to get folks outside of their own context and see what's happening elsewhere, to leverage those ideas and bring them back to our own school. So that's just a little bit of what happened here with Bouchon at Bossy. Again, great opportunity for us to show what's happening here, but also an opportunity for us to talk about some of the challenges that we face and some of the successes that we have had.
That's great, Aaron. Thank you so much. I especially love how you talked about continuing that relationship, and now you really become a trusted resource and advocate for the office. So that was fantastic. Thank you. I want to move next to Principal Vicki Puckett in Washington to talk about her visit with Representative Adam Smith last year. So Vicki, I will turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, NASSP members. I just wanted to reiterate what Aaron said earlier. It's the importance of being able to stay connected with the people that are making those decisions in our country about public education. I have found the experience to be a very rewarding experience on both the students having that experience, the staff, and of course myself. And then of course, Representative Adam Smith, who I want to talk briefly about. So Congressman Smith, he's been to our school a few times, and what we tried to do is we tried to put him in front of students, and we spent a lot of time with students leading him around the school, and I prepped the students prior to his visit so that they could talk about some of the issues that are going through the legislative process and how it affects them in the classroom. And then we had the tour guides, which were our students, and then he went to speak to some classes. One unique thing that he did with one of our classes that I thought was really helpful was the students in the class wanted to know how bills are passed and how he became a congressman. And so it turns out that he was actually one of the youngest congressmen to go into Congress. He was 25 years old when he entered into Congress. And the students were really just wowed by that. And his messaging to them is, you can make a difference even if you're a student and even if you're really young. And he talked about his journey of doing that. Our students were really wowed by that. But they were also able to share some of the challenges that they face and some of the things that are going well. School safety was a big one that they talked about. They talked about access to technology and does every student be able to have that kind of access? So clear down to the grassroots of what they do every day as a student. We also have a radio station at our school. So one of the media opportunities that we gave him, and you can see that in the little picture in the middle, that he was interviewed by one of our radio hosts, students that run the radio station. And so he was aired all over Seattle area with the radio station, his interview with the students. So not only did our high school get to benefit, but our community that listens to our radio station got to hear his message and his visit to our school. The the only thing that I would continue to recommend is back to what was said earlier from Zach, is that you have to continue to call the office. You can't just do a one and done. You have to continue to do that. And I think that that's critical. I also take the time to have our legislators at the state level come in, and that's the picture on the far right that you see is Representative Sen. And she visited special needs classrooms because Washington State was working on some laws around special education. I don't know what state isn't working on that, but anyway, so she got to spend some time in classrooms with students with moderate to severe disabilities, along with students who have mild disabilities. And they got to tell their story about the challenges that they have in learning and how the services that they are taking advantage of benefits them. And so Representative Sen was quite impressed with their explanations. So again, I want to stress the importance of that ongoing relationship and getting our representatives, our congressmen, our senators in front of our constituents, because there's some great picture opportunities for them as well, and also sharing about their exposure to our students. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vicki. That's really helpful information from you and Aaron both. Just as great examples of how important these things are. And like Vicki and Aaron both said, members are going to be interested in coming to schools. I mean, we do know that. We've seen that in the past. You know, we're getting near the end of the webinar here, so just wrapping up a little bit. For next steps, we do want to reiterate once again, for more information, please visit the Shadowing Visit website, Shadowing Visit page on the National Principals Month website, principalsmonth.org/shadowing visits, for some pointers and some ideas of what you can do during visits to help you out with this. If you are interested in inviting a member of Congress to your school and you're not sure who your member is, go to nassp.org/findmyofficials. That's a really easy tool we have up there to help you identify who your representatives are in the federal government. And last but not least, if you do need help with scheduling, planning visits, or even finding those lawmakers, finding the correct staff to reach out to, finding, you know, what maybe, or if you have other questions about other pointers even, reach out to Greg or myself. Our emails are on the page there right now. Please feel free to reach out to either of us. We are always happy to help in facilitating these shadowing visits and helping other principals get involved in doing them. We think they're, like we said before, we think they're extremely important and really helpful.
And before we wrap up here, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. If anybody has a question and you haven't typed it in yet, again, the chat feature is in the navigation bar for Zoom meetings. Under More, click Chat, and you can type in a question there. So the first question we have is from Beth Borgen. Will you be sharing this PowerPoint so that I can bring it to a larger group of administrators to explain what I plan to do? Beth, yes, we definitely will share the PowerPoint file with you. We are also going to be creating a recording of this particular training. So if it's even easier just to show a recording of this, we will have this up on NASSP's YouTube channel, and we will be sure to share that with everybody who attended the webinar today. The next question we have is from Susie Ellison, who is with our Alabama Association. And Susie says, my responsibility is to inform our membership of opportunities to invite public officials into schools. Aaron and Vicki, how do you recommend getting other principals to do shadowing visits?
For me, I really challenge them to just be a part of the communication with me. And I talk to them, there's just a lot of anxiety about getting officials in and really being a dog and pony show, if you will. But the reality is they just want to have a conversation. And I think as real as we can be and as open as we can be to having conversations with them and lessening the anxiety of making it some big to-do that an official is visiting, I think the better off you will be and the more impact you'll have. And so I've challenged a few of my colleagues as well just to even reach out and stay consistent and know that there are people who will come because they want to see multiple schools. They don't want to just get one, but they would prefer to see other ones as well. And so I've challenged some of my folks to do that.
So this is Vicki from Washington. What I did when I was first learning how to do this is I reached out to my superintendent to say, okay, I don't live in the school district, so who are our constituents or who are our local legislators? And I started at the local level first and just got to know them as people in the community and invited our superintendent to be involved in a couple of the meetings that I had initially. And then And then I branched out to who are our federal government officials. And so I recommend very strongly, if you're new at this and you're a little bit nervous about doing it, to start first at the local level, because you do want to have some impact at local level where your school is, and know who are the leaders in that community, to be able to help network with them to be able to make it better for your school. And in Washington State, we actually have a person that leads the whole advocacy process. And we have representatives from each of our regions of our state that meet quarterly. And so we're able to talk more at that level at statewide and network. And usually I get some spotlight time on the agenda to be able to talk about how to set up a visit and what that looks like, and who to involve in that visit, and what your agenda might look like, and what are the things that our congressmen and legislators want to have an interest in talking about. So that would be my recommendations.
Great, thank you for the question, Susie. I think that's it in terms of questions in the chat. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend our webinar today, and hopefully everyone will be reaching out to their members of Congress and other elected officials soon to invite them for shadowing visits. Again, if you need help with this, Zach and I are here to help. NASSP has a lot of resources to assist with this process, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.